Tomato Meter ranked all the Oscar Best Picture winners, and this film came out on top. In a cramped semi-basement apartment in Seoul, the Kim family struggles to get by. Father Ki-taek, mother Chung-suk, daughter Ki-jung, and son Ki-woo make meager living folding pizza boxes. To save money, they resort to stealing Wi-Fi by sitting by the bathroom window and even allowing toxic fumigation smoke to enter their home to kill bugs, despite the risks to their health. One evening, Ki-woo's friend Min visits and brings a scholar's rock from his grandfather, believed to bring wealth. He also offers Ki-woo a job opportunity. Since he'll be traveling abroad, he wants Ki-woo to take over his tutoring position for the daughter of a wealthy family. Ki-woo, with his solid English skills from military service and multiple attempts at university entrance exams, is eager to take the chance. Meanwhile, Ki-young can easily forge documents to pretend she's a university student. Min's recommendation should suffice, as Mrs. Park, the wife, is quite naive. Dressed in his best clothes and armed with fake documents, Ki-woo heads to the luxurious Park family home. After gaining entry from the housekeeper, Moon Gwang, he meets Mrs. Park, who is eager to interview him. She barely examines his paperwork and relies on Min's endorsement, but she wants to observe the first lesson to ensure Ki-woo is suitable. During the lesson with the shy daughter Da-hee, Ki-woo comforts her with a gentle gesture when she struggles, allowing her to warm up to him. Mrs. Park is pleased with Ki-woo's performance and decides to hire him at a generous salary. After the first tutoring session, Ki-woo meets Da-song, Mrs. Park's son, who's joined the Scouts and is totally into playing Indians. Since Ki-woo was a Scout himself, he connects with Da-song. When Mrs. Park shows him her son's drawings, Ki-woo gets a clever idea. He starts praising Da-song's art as if it were a true masterpiece. When Mrs. Park mentions needing a new art teacher, none of the previous ones lasted more than a month. Ki-woo recommends his cousin's classmate Jessica, an art therapist. In reality, he's talking about his sister, who shows up the next day for an interview, pretending to be this Jessica after quickly reading up on art therapy online. While Mrs. Park chats with his sister, Ki-woo tutors Da-hee, who feels a bit jealous about Ki-woo's friendship with the art teacher. He reassures her he's not interested, and they share a kiss. Meanwhile, Ki-jung convinces Mrs. Park to let her give Da-song his first lesson alone. By the end, she impresses Mrs. Park by showing how well-behaved Da-song has become. She also points out signs of trauma in his paintings, mentioning a troubling incident from first grade. Convinced her son needs art therapy, Mrs. Park hires Ki-jung at a generous rate. Later, she meets Mr. Park, who offers to have their chauffeur, Yoon, drive her home. Wanting to keep her living situation a secret, Ki-jung asks Yoon to drop her off at the train station because she's meeting someone. During the ride, she cleverly stashes her panties in the car. Thanks to the new salaries, the Kim family starts enjoying better meals while plotting their next move. Meanwhile, Mr. Park discovers the panties in the car and jumps to conclusions, suspecting Yoon of having affairs and possibly using drugs. After class, Mrs. Park seizes the opportunity to ask Ki-young about Yoon. Ki-jung mentions how Yoon tried to take her home instead of the station. Mrs. Park decides to fire Yoon to avoid a scandal, and Ki-jung jumps in, suggesting that a more mature driver would be more trustworthy, recommending her uncle's old chauffeur. Surprise. This old driver is actually Ki-taek, who used to work as a chauffeur. During a test drive with Mr. Park, Ki-taek impresses him with his manners and extensive knowledge of the city, expertly navigating without GPS. His smooth driving even keeps Mr. Park's drink from spilling, leading to an immediate hire. The final piece of their scheme is the trickiest. Moon Gwang, the cunning housekeeper who has worked there since the previous owners. Ki-woo learns from Da-hee that Moon Gwang is allergic to peaches, so he and Ki-jung start tossing peach fuzz at her when she's not looking. Moon Gwang ends up visiting the doctor, convinced it's not allergies. Ki-taek, as part of the plan, captures a selfie with Moon Gwang in the background and shows it to Mrs. Park, claiming he overheard Moon Gwang saying she has tuberculosis. At the Park house, when Moon Gwang starts coughing due to her allergies, Ki-taek cleverly dabs some ketchup on the tissues in the trash to make it look like she's coughed up blood. Concerned about having a sick employee, Mrs. Park makes Ki-taek promise to keep it from her husband and then fires Moon Gwang, claiming she quit. Mr. Park soon worries about the lack of cooking and cleaning, so Ki-taek hands him a card for a reputable agency he almost worked for, suggesting Mr. Park tell his wife he got the idea from there. This agency supposedly provides reliable staff, but it's all part of the Kim's scheme. The phone number on the card is the second one Ki-jung got for this purpose. When Mrs. Park calls, she pretends to be a secretary requesting a lot of official paperwork. Eventually, Chung-suk gets hired as the new housekeeper, and the entire Kim family is now in the mix. Da-song notices they all smell alike, but they realize it's not the soap. It's the scent of their old, cheap apartment. One day, while the Parks are off on a camping trip, Chung-suk stays behind to manage the house. As soon as they leave, the whole Kim family moves in, taking over the place. They raid the pantry, indulge in fine wines, and Ki-woo even swipes Da-hae's diary, dreaming of proposing to her when she enters university. While the Kims enjoy their feast, fantasizing about life in a wealthy family, a storm brews outside, and suddenly the doorbell rings. It's Moon Gwang, claiming she forgot something in the basement when she was hurriedly fired. While her family hides, Chung-suk lets her in, but Moon Gwang takes too long down there, prompting Chung-suk to check on her. She finds Moon Gwang struggling to move a cupboard, and together they uncover a hidden door leading to an underground bunker built by the previous homeowner. Moon Gwang reveals that her husband, Oh Gun-se, has been living there for years, hiding from loan sharks. She had helped him move in when the house was waiting to be sold, and the Parks never discovered the bunker. Moon Gwang would sneak him food when the Parks weren't looking, which explains Mr. Park's suspicions about her eating habits. She wants to talk to Chung-suk alone, asking for permission for her husband to continue living there, even offering to pay for food deliveries. Chung-suk refuses and reaches for her phone to call the police, but just then, her family slips down the stairs while trying to eavesdrop. Moon Gwang quickly records them with her phone, catching their familial names in the act. Now, she and her husband have the upper hand, threatening to expose the Kims' deception if they don't comply. They force the Kims to crouch in a corner while Moon Gwang and Gyun-se take over the house. Moon Gwang even criticizes them for being messy, noting how she and her husband always respected the architect's elegant design during their secretive visits. The Kims seize the opportunity to pounce on the couch, engaging in a hilarious wrestling match with the couple over the phone. Ki-taek grapples with Gun-se while Ki-jung showers Moon Gwang with a cascade of peaches to knock her out, and Ki-woo swiftly snatches the phone to erase the recording. Suddenly, the house phone rings. Chung-suk answers, her eyes widening in shock as Mrs. Park informs her that they're returning early due to a storm that derailed their camping trip. Without missing a beat, the Kims spring into action. Chung-suk dives into cooking. Ki-taek hauls Gyun-se down to the basement and ties him up. Ki-jung shoves trash under the furniture, and after dragging Moon Gwang, now unconscious, to the basement, Ki-woo heads upstairs to return the diary. Just as the Parks walk in, Ki-woo ducks under Da-hae's bed, and Ki-jung rolls onto the table. Moon Gwang stirs, attempting to escape, but Chung-suk kicks her back down, causing her to tumble and hit her head. Meanwhile, Gun-se is busy with the light switches, following a Morse code guide pinned to the wall, hoping that Da-song, being a scout, will one day decipher his message. Ki-taek finds this idea utterly absurd, before tying Gun-se up to a pipe and leaving. Upstairs, during dinner, Mrs. Park recounts a traumatic tale about Da-song's first-grade experience. One night, while sneaking into the kitchen for his birthday cake, he stumbled upon a ghost emerging from the basement, none other than Gun-se. This encounter left Da-song in convulsions, hence his ongoing therapy sessions, and the family avoids being home for his birthday. Meanwhile, Ki-woo narrowly escapes detection by Da-hae when she picks up her dog and fails to investigate further under the bed. After the Park couple retreats to their bedroom, Ki-woo and Ki-taek sneak into the living room to find Ki-jung, only for Da-song to come bounding downstairs, prompting the trio to hide under the table. To their surprise, Da-song wants to camp out in the rain-soaked garden, and his parents, ever the doting ones, decide to keep watch on the couch. The Kims must endure the Park's complaints about their smell and their playful antics. Eventually, when the couple finally drifts off into a deep sleep, the Kims make a break for it, sprinting through the rain toward their neighborhood, which is now a waterlogged mess. Their apartment is also flooded, so they frantically salvage what they can before heading to a local gymnasium, offering refuge to those displaced by the storm. Ki-woo clutches the scholar's rock tightly as he sleeps. Troubled by his father's lack of a plan for the chaos left behind in the basement, back in the bunker, Moon Gwang succumbs to her earlier concussion, and Gyun-se, desperate for help, attempts to send a Morse code signal using the lights. Da-song sees the flickering and tries to decode it. Gyun-se, clearly out of sorts, ends up with a bloodied forehead. The next day, Mrs. Park decides to throw a spontaneous birthday bash for Daesong. The Kims muster their best smiles, masking their devastation over losing their home. Chung-suk works hard to prepare the food and set the table outside. Ki-taek chauffeurs the Parks around to gather party supplies while enduring their grimaces at his smell, and the siblings don their best smart teacher personas, all while being treated as esteemed guests. During the festivities, Mr. Park and Ki-taek don Indian costumes for a playful skit to save Da-song's cake. After spending a little time with Da-hae, Ki-woo decides to head back to the basement with his scholar's rock, only to be ambushed by Gun-se. who has somehow managed to escape his bonds. In a tense struggle, Gun-si knocks Ki-woo out with the rock, then makes a dash for the garden party, knife in hand. Fueled by revenge, Gun-si races out to avenge Moon-gwang, plunging a knife into Ki-jung. Meanwhile, Da-song is struck by a seizure upon seeing the unfolding horror, while Da-hae discovers Ki-woo's lifeless body and rushes to get help. Ki-taek hurries to his daughter's side, pressing on her wound to stem the bleeding, just as Chung-suk leaps onto Gun-se and takes him down with a barbecue skewer. Talk about a grill master. The winning scene of the film is when Mr. Park, completely unfazed by the turmoil around him, is solely focused on getting his son to the hospital, orders Ki-taek to drive. But Ki-taek isn't about to abandon his family. He hurls the keys at Mr. Park, who fumbles them onto the grass, only for Gun-se to collapse right on top of it. Incredibly, even in this life-or-death moment, Mr. Park takes a moment to pinch his nose while he moves the body. This despicable act ignites Ki-taek's fury, leading him to grab the knife and take out Mr. Park before making his escape. Fast forward a few weeks, and Ki-woo wakes up from brain surgery, his mind a fragile jumble. He can't help but chuckle at the absurdity of life as he learns of his sister's death and his father's disappearance. He finds himself arrested and put on trial for fraud, but is eventually released on probation due to the traumatic events being labeled as self-defense. His laughter fades when he sees a news report about their now-abandoned house, making everything feel painfully real. Neither Ki-woo nor his mother knows where Ki-taek has gone, but detectives keep tailing them, convinced they might lead to him. Months later, after the media frenzy dies down and the cops finally back off, Ki-woo climbs a mountain to spy on the Park's house, now occupied by an unsuspecting German family. To his shock, he discovers someone is using the lights to send Morse code messages. It's his dad. Ki-taek has been hiding in the house's bunker, having buried Moon-gwang in the backyard and surviving by raiding the kitchen nightly. Every day, he sends out Morse messages, hoping his son will eventually see them. Back in their old apartment, Ki-woo pens a heartfelt letter to his dad, vowing to work tirelessly until he can buy the house and reunite with him. Parasite made history by becoming the first South Korean film to win the Oscar for Best Picture. Bong Joon-ho also won Best Director, Best Original Screenplay, and the film won Best International Feature Film. Thank you for watching.